the biggest area on every dairy is the parlor for making milk, or getting your income. So the income that we were able to generate out of that dairy or out of the parlor was actually, helping the bottom line on this dairy.
Welcome to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. I'm your host, Peggy Coffeen, and today I'm on location here at Woldt Family Farms in Brillion, Wisconsin. And this farm is actually a stop on the virtual farm tours for World Dairy Expo. So on October 4th, Friday morning at 10 a.m., the Woldt family will be joined by Pauly Paul from Complete Management Consulting. I'll be there as well to host a virtual farm tour to give you a sneak peek inside this dairy and their story of going from good to great with the help of Pauly and his team. What you're going to be hearing about is how they were able to run 200 more cows through the parlor every single day without adding any additional labor. How they were able to reduce the treatments on fresh cows from 40% all the way down to 5%, while increasing employee engagement and retention all along the way. So this is a little sneak peek that you get today here at Woldt Family Farms with my guest, Pauly Paul from Complete Management Consulting, as to how they were able to do that and more. So Pauly, welcome to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast here at Woldt Family Farms today.
Thanks for having me, Peggy.
And Pauly, you and your team have done work here for the past couple of years, and they came to you with a desire to say, how can we go from good to great? And you were able to help them do that.
Correct. When we first got involved with the Woldt family here, the one thing they were looking for is they were looking for some help getting a little better. They were doing a great job with everything already, but they just wanted to get to that next level. So we identified a few things, and that's what we really focused on is, what we could do to get them to that next level.
Yeah, and at Woldt Family Farms, this is a family farm that has not only the dairy here, but also several other business entities that they operate. But this was an area where they saw and were committed to some areas of improvement. And one of the things that I know you've shared with me about the Woldts as well is their open-mindedness to wanting to receive some suggestions and taking those things to be able to take a well-run dairy. They do everything at a very high level around here, to take a well-run dairy and to just take it to that next level. When we visited with the herd manager here, Jeff Evenson, one of the things that he said was their goals were to become more efficient and more profitable. And there are a few key ways that your team really helped with that. And one of those really relates back to the efficiency side. And it all started where you start on a lot of dairies you work with. And where is that?
Right in the milking parlor.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got into the milking parlor, and we could see that there was some opportunity there to get cows through a little bit more efficiently, just streamlining some things, working on the procedure, working on some of the employee training. So we really focused on that. My team really did a great job of getting the cows through as quick as they could, and making things as efficient as possible in that parlor. And in the end, we were able to get about 200 extra cows through that parlor, each milking, which gets more milk in a tank, gets more income for the dairy.
Okay, so 200 more cows through the parlor every single day without adding additional labor.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned a little bit of the ways of how you were able to achieve that with the team here, but go into a little bit more detail. Like when you jumped in, boots on the ground, which is your approach that you and your team take, what did you see when you first started getting into the parlor as far as the opportunities and the areas to really tweak and hone in? What was it like when you first showed up at Woldt Farms?
So when we first got here, the employees were doing a pretty good job. I mean, they were moving through a lot of cows. They were getting the cows through the parlor, but there were some efficiencies that we saw we could improve on and get the cows in and out of that parlor much quicker. In the end, what that does is it gets the cow back to her pen, gets her into her environment where she can eat, drink, lay down, rest, and make more milk. So by doing that, it's a much better deal for the cows, much better for the dairy, makes that parlor more efficient. the biggest area on every dairy, on a dairy, is the parlor for making milk, or getting your income. So the income that we were able to generate out of that dairy or out of the parlor was actually, helping the bottom line on this dairy.
So when you talk about looking for those areas where there were inefficiencies in getting cows to and through the parlor, let's back up a little bit. Like some of the things that you saw here are things you see in a lot of dairies.
Right.
What were the things that really stuck out on the inefficiencies?
So the key to what we found here on this dairy was just the routine that they were doing, just streamlining that, getting the timing down so that the cows had enough prep time so that when that unit went onto that cow, she milked out as quick as she could, got that unit off. In the end, we got a little bit healthier teat ends. Those are the things we really looked at. Routine, and then after the cows were done, we noticed there was a lot of hanging around time. And once we got that figured out and got cows moving through, got the employees to finish up the one side and focus on that, and then get to the other side, and just getting into a steady rhythm. That was the biggest thing that we really had to focus on, trying to get more cows through the parlor.
So just break that out a little bit, parlor-wise. What type of setup do they have in the parlor here, and what was that protocol, and how has it changed to be able to have that shortened gap time and be more succinct in the steps in the parlor?
So they have a very good parallel parlor. I mean, it's a double 16. It's very efficient for the two people that they have in there. But what we found when we first got here, the employees did a lot of drifting. So instead of focusing on the group of cows that were loading in the parlor and filling in, they would drift. One person would tend to go back and mess around to the other side a little bit. So there was a lot of wasted time. So we had to really focus, or get them to focus on the cows that are entering that parlor, get that the timing all down. Cows really love routine. So if you can keep the same routine every day, the cows do much better. So we were able to get timings down so that the cows knew that, all right, the prep time starts now, and at the end of the prep time, the unit's on, and it's the same for every shift. So we worked with all three shifts. We spent some time around the clock, because that's one thing a lot of people will do, is they'll focus on the first shift. They'll get them all keyed in, but it's the second and third shift that tends to get left go, and people don't really focus on that. So that's something we always try to focus on, make sure the other shifts, whether it's 3 shifts or 2 shifts, we try to focus on making sure that they get the same attention as the first shift does.
Okay, so that was really one of the first steps that you took, was, for one, looking at what was going on in the parlor from the prep side, the protocol side, the timing side, and then saying, how can we dial this in and dial this down to really get succinct and to have each person fully engaged in their specific role versus drifting off and doing something else, or crossing lines, so to speak, in their roles in the parlor.
Right.
And so when you do that, are you like setting a stopwatch? How do you really get that time down in such a measurable way?
So we will do the stopwatch approach. We'll watch and see how long each step takes, based on the size of the parlor, based on cow flow, whether it's a parallel or a herringbone parlor. We'll look at those times and make sure we got everything keyed in. One big thing we found with some dairies, the brushes came in. So that was another learning curve there that people had. We had the employees manually doing everything by hand, and now we have this automated brush. So we've noticed on some dairies that have the brushes, we've had to, relook at that and see what different things we can do. And we found some really good ways to be more efficient with those, with adding on more tools, in the toolbox, I guess, on the dairies. So, but here we really focused on those employees and tried to make sure they were doing their job and doing it the same every single time. Once they got into that repetition, the cows kind of fell right into place, and the cows really liked the same routine.
Yeah.
So beforehand, we had noticed a lot of cows, weren't milking out all the way, or their letdowns weren't all the same. And now it just flows. Everything is much better that way.
Yeah. So milk's flowing, cows are flowing. 200 cows more that are able to go through that parlor. And that's been the results in the last couple of years since you and your team have been here, assisting the Woldt family and herd manager Jeff with just tightening up routines.
Right.
And so you mentioned something, Pauly, too, that a lot of it has come down to training employees and being very diligent on that piece of the process. Now, when I had a chance to visit with Jeff not long ago, one thing that he had shared too was how much employee morale has changed here. And how do you attribute and tie in the additional training that was happening in the parlor that resulted in some really good things on the performance side, but that also played into employees that are happier to show up at work every day?
So I think when we started working with the employees, I have one very good employee that works great in the parlor, and he's bilingual, and he's awesome with getting, the communication going with the employees. So he spends a lot of time with them and learning, what they like, what they do, and how they're, so he gets, embedded with them a little bit and understands what's going on with their day-to-day life here. So I think just being a part of them and then showing that, hey, we really care about what you're doing. We really care about, the end product. So, and I think before, they were able to, they didn't have the communication or the interaction with management beforehand. And I think by bringing Scott in, he was able to come in and work with them and really, kind of bring the management and the employee side together and, open up the lines of communication a little more. And yeah, the morale here is totally changed.
Yeah, and that's one thing that Jeff had mentioned when him and I had visited, was that people are really happy to show up at work every day. And that makes such a huge difference in overall what the dairy is able to achieve. And something else that came up in that conversation too, Pauly, that he attributes to the work that you and your team at Complete Management Consulting brought to Woldt Farms here is a pretty dramatic decrease in the amount of treatments that were being done in the fresh cow area. So let's shift over to that piece of this good to great story of what your team has done here at Woldt Family Farms. What was that like when you got here, that treatment and handling of specifically that fresh cow group?
So one of the things that we recognized when we first started here is it seemed like they were a little heavy on employees. And a lot of times when I see that happening, they'll spend more time with fresh cows than what they really need to. So that means more lock time, more interaction in those pens. Many times those cows just need to be left alone. They need to, relax, not be bothered all day long. And I saw a lot of that happening here. The other thing we saw, many dairies tend to put the fresh cow pen right at the very back of the parlor or right near the parlor. And in this case, those cows were right at the very back of the parlor. They went from the quietest part on the farm, they had their calf, then they got moved into the busiest part of the entire facility. So these cows went from peace and quiet to mass chaos. So we noticed that, so we found another pen in the calving barn that had milk cows in it, and we decided to move those cows into that pen. And get them away from all this chaos and let them rest and let them do natural cow things. So we went from nearly 40% of the cows being treated down to 5% or in the low single digits. And a lot of that had to do with just the way we train the employees, how we worked with them, moving those cows, getting them back into their normal environment, and making sure feed and everything else was there, plentiful, and the right ingredients. So all that combined, I think, attributed to what they have today.
Yeah. And so that's that combination of spending time with employees and helping them get trained up on the milking side, the protocol side. Now we layer onto that, just once again, going back to your boots on the ground approach of doing a full assessment of the dairy and looking for the opportunities to be able to increase some efficiencies and to reduce some costs and expenses and some handling of the animals that could be causing a little additional stress. That's where you were able to see this opportunity to look at where those fresh cows were, for one, located, and for two, the protocol through which they had been handled, which had worked fine and served them well for a long time, but now it was time to make a change.
Right.
And the results of moving that area of animals, reducing the amount of hands-on activity going on that disrupted their day as they're recovering. And then on top of that, realizing that there was less need for intervention when it was all said and done. What were the results of that?
Yeah, so financially, obviously, your medicine costs drop. Milk production on those cows tends to go up anytime you don't have to treat those cows. You're not dumping milk. So in the end, you're cutting expenses. We cut some labor on that side. So you cut some labor, you cut some vet and med costs. You end up increasing milk production. You got healthier cows. You're putting that milk into the tank rather than dumping that milk. There's just so many benefits to that. And you're setting them up for a good lactation.
Yeah.
You know, if the cow calves in and transitions properly, they're going to be set up to, maximize their milk production.
Yeah, and when it's all said and done, that reduction in treatments was from 40%
Right.
all the way down to 5%.
Right.
So pretty compelling numbers. And then you add to those benefits that are included with that, and we can estimate what the dollar signs attached to that would be. But again, this is the good to great story here of a dairy that was doing some things really well, but was open to the ideas and the opportunities to say, let's bring in some outside eyes to show us and to assist us with really being at the level that they wanted to be at. One other area that I wanted to visit with you about too, Pauly, that comes about with a lot of your technique and style is cross-training employees. You mentioned this a little bit, especially as you're able to alleviate some of the tasks that used to be very intense in that fresh cow area. So what did you do to be able to help this dairy hit their goal of being more profitable and more efficient by enabling employees to be able to do more with their time here and maximize their hour?
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time with management and the employees, the main herds people, training them. Once we got done, working in the parlor, we got moving into the the fresh cows, getting those cleaned up. But I think the key to that was training these employees how to walk cows, how to identify a sick cow, rather than having to physically lock that cow up and do all the checking on her. You can actually walk a pen, identify this cow, and instead of maybe locking up 10, 20 cows, you're only locking up one cow or maybe two cows. We did a bunch of other things on a dairy. There's been ultrasound training done. There's been just stuff on the repro side. A lot of hands-on things have gone on from the parlor all the way through the herds people and into the management side. The manager that's here right now, when we first got started working with him, he was a herdsman here. He did some of the feeding, he did the breeding. We got him going on ultrasound. So he was doing a lot of the hands-on stuff. He's still doing a lot of that today, but he really didn't have anything to do with the employees on the management side. So we helped guide him into that position and helped him through some of the problems he was having on the employee side. And now he's really blossomed into one of the top managers around. So I think that's a really good story for from where he was to where he is now. He's doing an awesome job.
Yeah, and Jeff, that
Yep.
manager that you're referring to, He'll be joining us at World Dairy Expo Friday, October 4th, 10 a.m. for this virtual farm tour of Woldt Family Farms. So you will be there, I'll be there. We'll get to hear from Jeff directly, as well as a few members of Woldt Family Farms, and just a little sneak peek to what else you'll be able to hear about for those that are able to either attend that virtual seminar in person or watch online through Expo TV is a couple of the members of the Woldt family here. We'll talk about some of the other things that they do and some of their areas that they're really passionate about, including conservation on the cropping side is a big one. And then also just a couple doors down from this barn that we're in right now is the Woldt Family Farms store. And that's a cute little store that's right here on the farm, utilizing a building that's been here for probably 100 years, Scrample's Old Tool Shop. And that's where they welcome the public in to come and purchase locally grown agricultural products, local beef from their farm, cheese, all kinds of other goodies. And you'll get a little sneak peek into not just what they're doing to go from good to great on the dairy side, but the way that they are operating and expanding at a high level in the way that they run as a business here at Woldt Family Farms as well. And so, Pauly, anything else you want to add today?
I think it's been really great working with the Woldt family here. They've come a long ways. I remember working with them probably, oh God, it had to be early 90s. It was the first time I met them and started working with them, and to see where they've come today it's totally amazing.
Yeah, and we can't wait to showcase this to those that are able to join us again for that virtual tour at World Dairy Expo, online and in person. And again, Pauly from Complete Management Consulting, thanks for joining us here on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast.
All right, thank you, Peggy.